Hello everyone, welcome to the latest eCommerce Explored webinar, our last in fact of 2024. It's great to have you tuning in. The eCommerce Explored webinars exist to discuss and hopefully find some answers to the questions e-commerce brand decision makers like all of you lot are wrestling with at the moment. In this session, we are tackling the big topic that is B2B e-commerce. Whilst growth in B2C e-commerce has pretty much stalled, not a lot of growth going on in the consumer space at the moment, there is still huge predictions of growth in B2B, double-digit annual sales growth, in fact, as more and more business buyers want to ease their purchasing activity by doing it all online. In this session, we'll be getting into all of that, plus just what should be on your B2B e-commerce strategy for 2025. And we'll be answering some of your questions as well. We've got plenty of time to get your questions answered. So if you have questions for our panelists, please do. New alert in the webinar thing. We'll deal with that later. That was rather exciting. Anyway, what was I talking about? I was talking about questions. So your questions. By the video where you're watching this right now, by that screen, you will find a Q&A box. If you add comments in there, that will flick up into where myself and the panelists are hanging out to bring you this session. You may even get answers whilst we're chatting about something else, because the panelists do tend to get active in the comments too. So do add the comments as we go. You can test that out right now by adding in where you're dialing in from, or a little hello, happy Christmas, something like that. We won't object to any of that. And the sooner you ask your questions via the comments area, the sooner or the more chance there is rather of me actually managing to ask those questions of our panelists, because I know what it's like. You've got an idea, but you're not sure you want to ask it. You leave it till the end, and then 10 minutes to go, you bombard me with questions. There's no chance I'm going to manage to get them answered. So ask early if you've got a question. Oh, nice. First comment, opening up. We've got Gethin coming in with an emoji. That's raised the bar, everybody. Emoji comments on the go here. Happy Christmas to you too, Gethin. And we've got Tiffany coming in from Canada. I'm guessing that is emoji not working in that scenario, but brilliant to have you here, Tiffany. So yeah, get those comments and questions coming in as we go through. And a huge thank you whilst you're all playing around with that to our session sponsors, SparkLayer and UpPro CSV Order Upload. It is great to have you guys involved with this session. And you can find out more about all of them somewhere on the page around this video. I think it's just below the video. You can click through to more information about our lovely sponsors. So who is joining me to talk about B2B e-commerce? Well, this is arguably one of the sessions I am more skilled to talk about, in that I've written a book about B2B e-commerce. But I would say our panelists are still far more skilled than me in the area of B2B e-commerce than I am, because they work in it all the time. So we've got Alex Weston joining us from SparkLayer. We've got Jason Greenwood from Greenwood Consulting, and we've got Kathleen Sullivan-Garman from Sully Garman and Associates. So a properly transatlantic tribe here to help us all get our B2B organized, sorted, strategically planned for next year. So let's get rid of the static photos of my guests and let's get the real guests up here on stage. Hello, everybody. Great to have you here. Thank you so much for being up for doing this in December of all times. I would love you to introduce yourselves to the audience, let them know a bit more about you, your areas of expertise, that kind of good stuff. Alex, we'll start with you and then we'll go clockwise around, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chloe. Thanks for having me. Hey, everyone, I'm Alex. I'm the sales director at SparkLayer. SparkLayer is a B2B platform for Shopify, BigCommerce, and other platforms. So we literally layer on top of the e-commerce platform to bring B2B functionality. So as a business, we've been going for about 4 years now. I've been here for just under 2 years, selling to lots of different B2B customers.
Excellent to have you here, Alex. Jason, please let us all know a bit more about yourself.
Yes, my name is Jason Greenwood. I've worked in the e-commerce space for over 24 years now, so one of the old hands in the game. And for the last 4 years in particular, I've specialized in B2B e-commerce consulting as an independent consultant. And I consult to not only B2B sellers, but I also consult to agencies that work in the B2B space, investors in the B2B e-commerce space, as well as platform vendors in the B2B e-commerce space. So kind of all facets of B2B commerce I work across.
Which is why we've got you here on the webinar. Awesome to have you here. Thank you, Jason. And
My pleasure.
Kathleen.
Yeah, so I'm over here on the west coast of the U.S., so far different time zone than the rest of you. I have my background as an e-com brand founder, and I've had some exits and decided after a few of those that I would take that knowledge and work with other brands and help them kind of avoid some of the pitfalls. I always say that sales and marketing are going to drive your revenue and operations are going to drive your profit. So all of my work is on the back end of e-commerce. So warehousing, cross-border, moving product around, making sure it gets to the customers, trying to find all of the ways, including tech and automation, that will automate the processes rather than all the manual work that will take up all of your profits by paying someone for their time. So I also work for a few SaaS companies that are developing solutions for the industry. So work kind of from a customer standpoint as subject matter expertise and kind of help them design the product so that it works for the brands.
I love your intro, Kathleen. It's like all the big hitting things we've got to get right next year: efficiency, automation, stock in the right places, customers, tech stack, all those big things. So yeah, I'm going to try and resist my tangential brain wanting to take us off down one of those routes and keep us on track by kicking off with the first slide deck statement. So for those who are new to the eCommerce Explored even webinars, I like to kind of put some statements and things in front of our panelists to get their take on it. So this is the first statement, which is something I firmly believe, but panelists, you are welcome to disagree with me, which is that every e-commerce business should be making a proactive strategic decision about whether or not to do B2B e-commerce in 2025. So you can't kind of sit around and think maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't. You need to go, right, this is our B2B e-commerce approach or not for next year. I think it's one of the essential things everyone should have worked out without risk of getting distracted by it or ignoring it when they shouldn't be. What do you guys reckon? Anyone fancy jumping in?
So I think that every brand hits inflection points in their growth where you hit a point where you have to make a decision to go left or right or straight. And B2B is one of those inflection points. And a brand I see will usually start in B2B and then branch into direct to consumer because they realize that they've got some traction and some name recognition because of all of the retail sales. You also see it the other way, super viral direct to consumer that the retailers start to discover and start to, send emails to and want to start buying. Then the brand is reactive. They instantly are trying to figure out how to do it. So you're right with the word proactive. In your statement, whether or not, I say strike out the or not because you have to diversify. You cannot sell just in one channel or then all of your income is coming from one channel and it's very risky.
Cool, I like that. So Kathleen agrees but strikes out the or not. Jason, what do you reckon?
Yeah, look, it's interesting because probably about half of the brands that come to work with me are pure play B2B brands that they've always done B2B, they've only ever done B2B, and they're looking for guidance on how to digitalize their business and how to get online for the first time sometimes. Oftentimes they may come to me and they will only do EDI currently or only do punch out or something like that as their digital channel sales model. But they're looking at how to bring digital services to their customers over and above the transaction. And they're looking at ways in which they can bring digital self-service and e-commerce self-service capabilities to their customers and be able to automate some of their back office processes at the same time. Whereas the other half of the customers that come to me are D2C brands oftentimes. I was just speaking to a new brand yesterday, and they've got a booming, they've only been up and running for 4 years, but they've got an absolutely booming D2C fashion brand. They've grown astronomically. They've doubled their sales every single year since launch on the D2C side of the business. But over the last 4 years, they've had, they use Gorgeous as their customer service system, and they've had over 50 requests over the last 4 years, most of those coming in the last 12 months from retail boutiques that want to sell their brand, that want to sell their products. And up until now, they've had no response. They basically gone back to them initially and said, hey, we don't do wholesale sales today, but we'll get in touch with you when we do. And so they've got a ready-made B2B buyer's market there that's already screaming out to buy through them through wholesale, and they don't have the wholesale capabilities to sell to them yet. And they're wanting to roadmap that out for 2025 and say, how can we tiptoe our way into selling B2B to these customers that we already have, that have already expressed interest and already want to establish a trade account with us. And so I've seen both sides, similar to Kathleen, D2C brands wanting to do B2B, B2B brands wanting to digitalize. And so I think I share Kathleen's sentiment in that I don't think most brands, even if they've got a super strong D2C brand, D2C to me is just a channel. It's not a business model. And so the reality is that if you want to de-risk your business, you probably have to be looking at strategic wholesale. We've seen the risks of not doing that with massive D2C brands like Allbirds, who have steadfastly avoided strategic wholesale until recently when they're just about ready to go bankrupt. And as that last Hail Mary pass, they've opened up wholesale channels. And so I would rather see brands be proactive on the B2B front than reactive on the B2B front.
Yeah, and let's face it, Allbirds are not the first one to follow that same curve. It's almost a tried and tested failure route. So much to unpick in there, Jason. D2C is not a business model. I'm going to avoid tangenting into that one for the moment as well. Although I totally get where you're coming from, I should say. I'm not exactly in disagreement. But you mentioned EDI and Punch Out. And I know a lot of the audience will probably be going, who? What's that? So could you give us a quick explanation of EDI and Punch Out? And then Alex, I'll come to you for your take on this statement too, please.
Yeah. Unlike the B2C and D2C world of e-commerce, where there's really only one digital sales channel, maybe a couple, but there's self-service e-commerce, right? You wouldn't start a new retail brand today and not offer e-commerce. It would be totally odd if you didn't offer e-commerce as a new retail brand today. And you might sell through other digital sales channels like marketplaces, Amazon, etc. But your primary owned sales channel would be your e-commerce channel. In the B2B world, we have three primary digital sales channels. We have self-service e-commerce, which is analogous to the B2C and D2C version of it. But then we have EDI and Punch-Out. EDI is electronic data interchange, and it's basically the buyer's ERP system or computer talking to the seller's ERP system or computer, and with basically no human involvement. The order comes from one computer to another computer, and it gets fulfilled. Punch-Out is similar in that the buyer's system is composed of a e-procurement system, also known as a Punch-Out system. And that can either be as a module of their ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System, or a standalone e-procurement management platform like a Coupa or a Jagger or something like that, where they create POs inside the buyer's system. They create all of their order through the buyer's system, and then that integrates with the seller's back office and fulfillment systems and catalog systems via this pipeline colloquially known as Punch-Out. So we have these three primary digital sales channels in the B2B world, which is two more than the traditional B2C and B2C world.
Yeah, for anyone tuning in who thought B2B was one same set of decisions to be answered for everybody, very much not. It's a very much more complex space, but when you get it right, it's brilliant. Alex, what's your take? Would you agree everyone needs to make a decision about B2B this year? Would you agree that everybody, as Kathleen was saying, has to do B2B this year?
Well, the easy answer as someone who sells a platform that enables people to do B2B would be to say, yes, everybody should do B2B next year. On the contrary, I'm actually going to say that I think there's a lot of direct-to-consumer brands, particularly at the starting point of their e-commerce journey that we speak to, who haven't really fully formed their D2C journey yet. They haven't really been on everything they need to do down that D2C channel just yet to kind of explore all the different areas where they can make the most of that market. So I think there are a cohort of brands where actually deciding not to do B2B right now and really skilling themselves up on the direct to consumer side, learning a lot more in that market, even sometimes changing their product a little bit to make sure it fits with the market that they're trying to sell to. There's a wise choice to say that you could invest a little bit more in that direct-to-consumer channel before you go down the B2B route, to make sure that when you do that, that you make the most of that opportunity. If you're a B2B retailer, though, and you're deciding at this point, should I be doing B2B e-commerce next year? The answer is yes. You are missing out on market share if you are not doing online B2B selling as a B2B retailer right now. In fact, I think we speak to customers every week who are just coming online for the first time, who say they're losing customers to competitors. Then their online experience isn't up to the mark of competitors even. And so if you're a B2B retailer already, like I said, you got to be looking at doing that next year. The answer is absolutely yes for that one.
Yeah, definitely firmly in catch-up mode if you're not doing, and let's not just an e-commerce site doing it properly. Oh, cool. We're getting some questions and comments coming in, but I want to pose another one of mine to you, because this session is all about growing B2B sales in 2025. So let's get to a really solid takeaway for the audience. What's your favorite or most impactful way to increase B2B e-commerce sales? Which I guess you could reframe as the top thing on my B2B e-commerce to-do list in 2025 would be. Kathleen, you're looking thoughtful, so I'll let you have a minute to think about it. Jason, Alex, either of you ready to jump in on this one?
Yes. Ungate your bloody B2B e-commerce experience. It's still, I still run into brands every single day, B2B pure play businesses that have a gated e-commerce experience, meaning you can't see anything that they sell until you authenticate. You can't see the products, you can't see prices, you can't see inventory, you can't see a damn thing. You wouldn't even know that they sold those products unless you already had a trade account with them. And what I would like to say there is if I can't log in and I can't see, or if I can't browse your website and see what products you sell, neither can Google. And Forrester just released a report last month that shows that over 70% of B2B buyers in the United States today are millennials or Gen Z. And the reality is they're not your traditional old school B2B buyer that has their favorite account manager that they send a fax to place their order. That's not the way the world works today. And now that 70% of buyers are a younger generation, a younger cohort of buyers, you now have to interact with them in a different way. And when these younger buyers go to find a new supplier of widget X, they're not exactly going to go to a trade show. They're not going to go to the yellow pages. They're going to go to Google and they're going to go supplier widget X, manufacturer widget X, distributor widget X. And if your catalog is not being indexed by Google, you're not going to be in their consideration set as a supplier because they don't know you exist. So my top tip is ungate your bloody B2B e-commerce experience so that Google knows you exist and can capture the long tail of your catalog items and index them properly so you can be found on the interwebs. And you don't necessarily have to show pricing. You don't necessarily have to show inventory until someone authenticates, but at least show and display and present your catalog in a meaningful way.
A passionate answer, I think we can say there from Jason. Love that. Alex, I couldn't tell whether you were nodding in agreement or nodding
I'm definitely nodding in agreement. Yeah, well, you could not agree with that. It's an absolutely delivered with a punch there. But I think if I was to kind of extend upon that, ungating your website is absolutely essential, as Jason said. Following on from that, once you've won an account, actually enabling your customers to use the website, or if Jason was saying it, actually bloody enable your customers to use the website. So the thing with B2B e-commerce is that most of the customers would have been buying in a different way previously. So human nature, we don't like change. Generally, they'll have been sending a spreadsheet to a sales rep, or they might have been calling the customer before. And generally, as humans, we like to stick with what we know. But if you're running a B2B focused business or B2B focused business, and you have a cohort of customers that typically have been doing that over the phone before, you're likely going to be met with some resistance when you launch that website. So if you want your customers to actually use it, you should enable them, run some training sessions, show them how to use your website, give them a guide on how to use it, let them know the different bits of functionality that can help them speed up that buying process in future as well. The amount of times that I've seen customers launch new websites and go, well, No one's using it. Well, of course they're not. You haven't told anyone about it, right? So tell your customers that you've launched the website. Tell them how to actually use it.
Such an important point. I reckon probably half of the book I wrote was on how to actually get your customers to use the e-commerce site afterwards. You know, the marketing, the training the sales team to help the team do it, and setting up those incentives so that the sales team aren't pretending there isn't a website because you've set up their
Exactly.
incentive to send them in the right direction.
Or you
Awesome
disincentivize them,
answers.
which I see very commonly. They take away commissions when orders come through digital channels, and that's the most surefire, most rapid way to ensure zero adoption by your customer base. Because if your sales team's not on board, neither will your customers be.
Yeah, it's a much more integrated approach than with D2C. Kathleen, what's your take? I've hidden the question. Let me put the question back up for you. What's your take on the most impactful way to increase B2B e-commerce sales?
You know, I'm going to keep giving that to Jason and Alex because, as I said, I'm not revenue gen. I'm on the backside. I'm making sure that the products move efficiently. So
let's flick
I don't
on
know.
one then. I like that though. Sometimes you have to just go, not my wheelhouse. Well, let them go.
Yeah, stay inside the thing I'm really good at. So.
Well, let's give you that one then. So I'm guessing you see plenty of mistakes in B2B on the ops and fulfillment side, because back in the day when I used to help brands do this sort of thing and businesses do this sort of thing, you'd find a whole load of problems on the front end. Oh, and then as soon as you started touching physical things, absolute nightmare. So what would your most common mistake you see in B2B e-commerce be?
You know, it's the most common mistake across all business, all e-com. I would say communication, but in this respect, it would be internal. So I like to run an SNOP, which is sales and operations planning, inside a company. So rather than a traditional org chart that's vertical, where all of the departments are a bit separated and siloed, I like to do it in a circle where they're all reporting to each other. So sales is reporting to ops what's going on with sales, so ops can make sure there's enough inventory and have everything ready. And then ops is reporting to finance on cost of goods so that they know they can afford it. And finance is reporting back to sales on what they have to charge. So I would say the biggest mistake is siloing internally so that there's a lot of disconnect. If they're not working with each other, sales may make promises that ops can't make in terms of timing or fulfillment. And again, ops might make promises on cost of goods that finance is like, oh, heck no, we can't do that. So I would say it's all about communication to, again, prevent being reactive and staying proactive, because your profit is in your proactivity.
Love
Very,
that.
very good point. Yeah, I see that a lot too. And as an extension and enhancement of what you just said, Kathleen, I see that very, very frequently when I'm going in and I'm scoping, say, a new e-commerce solution for a merchant or seller in the B2B space, they oftentimes want to carry over exactly what they have been doing in all their internal operations. They want to carry over those exact same processes exactly as they are into a new e-commerce channel. And oftentimes they want to bring over the exact same service processes and all the ways in which they collect quotes and all those things. They want to run the same exact processes that have built up over the last 10, 15, sometimes 50 years of business, because oftentimes these B2B sellers are multi-generational family businesses, and I'm now dealing with the grandchild of the founder in many instances, who's now take over running these big legacy behemoth businesses. I mean, sometimes these B2B brands people have never heard of, and they're doing 100, 200, $500 million a year in business, and they have very entrenched processes around sales management, pricing structures, trade agreements, etc. And what they miss what I believe to be a golden opportunity to take a wholesale look at everything they're doing and saying, well, look, if we adopted perhaps some of the more out-of-the-box processes of the technology we're adopting, for example, instead of trying to force the technology to fit the old ways we've been doing things, they've missed a golden opportunity to modernize and take a very holistic look at everything they're doing and how they're doing it and say, is this still fit for purpose as of, well, soon 2025? Is it still fit for purpose? Is it still what my customers are looking for? And oftentimes I'm called in to actually run customer interviews, back to Kathleen's point and back to your point, Chloe. I like to suggest and recommend to my clients, they start adoption planning before we even go into scoping. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to build something that is based on a whole lot of assumptions about how our customers want to interact with us and do business with us. Why don't we just ask the question first so that we build something out of the gate that is automatically going to see high rates of adoption because it was tailored from day one to meet the expectations of the customer.
Well, it's the massive opportunity that an existing B2B business has when they're going into e-commerce, is they can actually ask their customers what they need and what they want. You're not launching blind. You've got so much research you can do. Alex, what's your take on the most common mistake you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's hard to disagree with anything that Kathleen and Jason have said there, to be honest. There's a ton of customers that we see, particularly those that have been doing B2B for a long time, that have immensely complicated pricing structures and then try and just bung them in some way to an e-commerce platform, and it just doesn't work. And it is a really good opportunity to kind of simplify that process and that pricing structure as well. But I think just to kind of put a different lens on it, one of the bigger mistakes that I see is that people think that you could just market to your B2B customers in the same way that you do for B2C customers. So assume that the channels will be the same, the way that you acquire those customers will be the same. Chloe, you wrote a book on this, so you're definitely going to be someone that could provide a lot of insight into how it's different. But the buying journey is completely different. The way you build trust is different. How you acquire customers is different. You're also not actually speaking to just one person oftentimes as a B2B customer. You're actually winning an account, and there are several different people that you're having to market to who have to use the website, who have to create orders in there. So there's a lot of differences from a marketing perspective, and I think that there's this natural assumption, specifically from customers who are typically B2C or historically B2C going B2B for the first time, who think that actually I can just do more of whatever I did on the B2C side, but kind of just find B2B customers that way as well, and it isn't the same.
I would, sorry, just one more comment on that. I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. The amount of times that I go in and I'm in a new consulting engagement, they don't know me from a bar of soap really in that first conversation. And one of the things I get back sometimes is, hey, we do most of our sales via EDI. We do most of our sales via Punchout. Why do we need an e-commerce portal or a trade portal? Why do we even need that? What they're forgetting is that even in a case where the transaction is largely computer to computer, there is a whole raft of digital services that most of those customers still want you to deliver to them through some sort of a trade portal type of experience, whether it's a request for quote experience, whether it's an automated RMA experience, whether it's a checking my historic orders experience, whether it's checking the status of inventory availability, downloading collateral around a product and learning about the specs of a product, being able to do research online before I actually place that order. There's a whole raft of digital services, that what I call the digital services layer, that most of even these automated purchases, those customers still want an entire raft of digital services that many times these B2B brands just aren't, they're not providing those services in any kind of meaningful way beyond the transaction. And I think that's a massive missed opportunity.
I agree with you a lot, Jason, because data only comes from digital services, and you cannot run profitably without data and being able to analyze and look at your sell-through and making sure that it was that maybe that replenishment order was worth it. And that's another thing on proactively, it's critical to make sure that you put your set your order minimums when you're starting these relationships. You have to order in a minimum of 6 or a minimum of 12, because those replenishment orders might come back as we want 3 units, and it's going to cost more to ship it than it would be worth. And so again, that's proactively, but the only way you know any of that and where your margins are is data, and having a digital presence is key to getting that data and not doing it old school.
Well, as Alex said, I could happily waffle on about the marketing differences for the rest of this webinar, but we've had a question that is already developing some very long answers in the comments. So let's take a look at this. So Stacey G is asking, up to now, we're a D2C brand. We wholesale reactively, but 2025, we are growing this. Love it. Proactive decision. Tick. Well done, Stacey. Ideally looking to export to the USA. This is from the UK, as comes out in other comments. We are wanting this to be on our terms in terms of payment terms. Normally it's 50% upfront, 50% later. I think I've only had time to scan the massive comments that have been going on. That's your normal. The feeling is that USA customers are used to very different payment terms, i.e. net 90 days, which will never work for us. What do you think? And Stacey's had some brilliantly precise answers coming back in. So I kind of don't want to get into the precision of this. What I'd rather ask the three of you is how does one as a B2B business or as a business work out how to go about making these big decisions? You know, if you're a D2C brand and you're going B2B for the first time, you could completely screw it up if you make the wrong payment term decisions. If you think, like Stacey does, that you've got to go net 90 for everybody, you have just destroyed your cash flow if you're used to D2C paying on the nose. Whereas if you know, but sometimes it takes a bit of confidence to go out there, because if you expect everyone to pay up front, you've also destroyed your ability to sell to them. But so how do you find, it's probably a question to come to you, Jason, first on this one. How do you help businesses work out that bigger piece of their B2B e-commerce activity and how they get these more transactional elements, I suppose, right? Hopefully there's a question in there you can answer.
Yeah, well, I've actually dealt with this exact question, and one of the things that when I'm working with a new B2B merchant client is how can we turn a challenge into an opportunity for differentiation. And I was working with a B2B seller down in New Zealand, and they actually turned credit terms into a massive UVP where they didn't have to discount to win business. They actually offered default 120-day terms, which were minimum 30 days longer than any of their competitors in the market. So they moved away from competing on price from a wholesale perspective. They were not the cheapest in the industry, but they were winning more business than everybody else, mainly because of their credit. They're very, very generous credit terms. And so instead of having to discount, they say, well, look, we're going to make a really good margin on what we sell, but we're going to have to make sure that we have the capital to be able to extend 120-day credit terms. And the great thing is, one of the reasons why 120-day credit terms in their world was so important, they worked in the wholesale fabric space. They needed time to get the fabric to their customers, who then manufactured that fabric into clothing or other items that were then sold into the market. And that 120-day terms was enough time to get the fabric to the customer, them to convert it into products that then they could sell, get the cash in, and then pay off their wholesale supplier. And so I would say that in this type of scenario, can we take a challenge to our cash flow and turn it into an opportunity to either make better margin, not have to discount, not have to, can it become a competitive advantage for us? And then finally, I would say, if you are expected in a new market to offer something that's unique to that market, maybe what you do is you say, well, look, okay, in that market, we have a different price list, right? If I know I've got to offer net 90 to be competitive, maybe in that market, I add an extra 5% to my price list, or an extra 10% to my price list, or whatever it is, to cover the expectations of that market and still maintain profitability for us to take into account the cost of capital. So I think that there's always an opportunity to turn a challenge into an opportunity. It's really how you look at it and what lens you look at it through.
I love that example of the 120 days. It's like, it shows the power of understanding your customer base. If you know your customer base aren't going to get paid until they've turned the product you sell them into something else. If you can take the worry of not having to pay you until they've been paid out of them, they will be willing to pay more because they've got that guarantee of the cash arriving and needing to go at the right times, which I guess is, don't make assumptions, go and work out what's going on, isn't it? It comes back to that research thing we were talking about earlier. Alex, you look eager to get in on this one.
Yeah, I think as you're talking, it's kind of getting the cogs whirring in my mind over here. And one of the things that actually could be useful for Stacey as a practical piece of advice is actually the Department of Business and Trade actually have a ton of advice for exporting to the US from the UK. They've got the learnings of loads of different businesses that they work with. They can give you a ton of just basically free advice on what payment terms would be expected for your market. Maybe they've got other customers that you could speak to there as well. So I would definitely recommend going and having a chat with the Department of Business and Trades and getting some advice from them, because they've got a ton of stuff on there to help with this exact question about exporting to the US.
Actually, for our international watchers, I bet there is a company, a group of people attached to your government who are also trying to help you export, who will help you do all this. For those of you in the
absolutely.
UK, we did our last session was on going global, and we had the brilliant Emma Jones from the department Alex just mentioned. I always want to call them the wrong thing because they rebrand about every 4 years, so I'll get the letters wrong. But I'll add a link to Emma, who was on her LinkedIn, in the comments for anyone who wants to dive in on it. We've had a follow-up question from Stacey, which I'm going to flag on the screen, and then Kathleen, I'll come to your thoughts, and then we'll move off payment terms and such and go on to another hot B2B topic. So Kathleen, adding this into the mix, you've given a whole pile of advice to Stacey on this with the exporting from the UK to US and all of that. Anything you want to add or summarize?
Yeah, on the suggested retail price, I think you can do suggested, you can do minimum. Very, very, very hard to enforce, and you could spend a lot of time and money, on, watching Google for what people are selling your product for. However, it is important to keep an eye on it, because if you do have a seller that has bought from you and is undercutting everybody else, the rest of those businesses are probably going to not be ordering as much from you anymore. So it's important to keep an idea on what people are selling your product for. I'm a firm believer in having that minimum retail price for your wholesale customers. And then after that minimum, they can do whatever they want. But I think it's really important that you sort of protect your brand and protect what people are finding when they're searching for it, shopping wise.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go to the next one on my slides, because this is super hot topic in the B2B space at the moment, the B2B e-commerce space. Anyone who's been involved in the B2B space, especially the D2C starting to sell B2B space, will have heard of FAIR and the huge impact that's had on the market. Those not familiar with it, basically similar impact to what Shopify had in the e-commerce platform space. So I reckon that B2B marketplaces should be part of every B2B e-commerce strategy. I'm doing another broad brush statement and saying it applies to everybody. Alex, you're giggling at my suggestion. What's your take on marketplace? Obviously, as at Sparkler, you're getting people coming who want that own website piece. Do you find they've done marketplaces first? Do you think they should be doing marketplaces? How do you see it fitting in?
A lot of customers have done marketplaces or use it in tandem. I see them personally as a great acquisition channel. They're a place where you've got, a ton of wholesale customers that you can get access to, and it's easier than going out and building your own market. It's high cost, so you've got high commissions that you have to pay. It's expensive to be on there, and you don't own your customer relationship. That's the key part of this, right? So whilst you've got your products listed on those marketplaces, you don't get to dictate how that story is then told, how you manage that customer relationship on an ongoing basis, how you build that trust, how you get them coming back time and time again with your own website experience. So just naturally, obviously, because of where I sit in the e-commerce space, I would lean towards you want to own your e-commerce relationships and you want to own your customer relationships, and it's better to do that through your own website. But I really think that marketplaces are a good acquisition channel, and so I think your broad statement is largely correct, that they can be used as in any kind of B2B e-commerce strategy.
But as with any channel, you've got to understand why you're using it, whether it's a marketing channel,
Absolutely,
a sales channel, or anything.
And you don't want to just have your products on there and pay a fortune and realize that that same customer is coming back time and time again, when you could be doing that on a much cheaper basis and have them buy through your own website rather than pay 30% commissions or whatever.
And it's important to keep an eye on the fine print. What's the marketplace's requirements? Are you allowed to sell somewhere else, or do you have to only sell there? Do they restrict what you can charge? It's really critical to read the fine print and figure out what the impact is, again, on your data, on your profitability, on your metrics. You won't really know if it's a good idea or not until you look through that fine print and then run your numbers. And when you look at it and you think, oh wow, that makes my margins way too tight. I can't afford for anything to go wrong. No returns, no problems with shipping, etc. If you're that tight, you probably can't afford to be on that marketplace. So really critical to read the details. And I mean, it's the same as when a new, larger retailer wants to do EDI transaction with you. Read the vendor guide. Make sure that you can afford what they require.
And your answer reminds me, Kathleen, of the fact that it's easy to go, we'll just list everywhere and customers will come. No, all marketplaces, every extra marketplace requires extra effort to market on it, to keep all the dots crossed, I's crossed, products up to date, and all the rest of it. And yeah, you can automate some of that, but you've also got to put some effort in. So you definitely want to be strategic about which ones you're picking. Jason, your take on this?
Yeah, look, I think there's two elements to this. One is selling on marketplaces, and two is being a marketplace, right? Many B2B sellers today are establishing their own marketplaces, and one of the reasons for that is because it's very rare that you'll get a manufacturer that is only a manufacturer. Oftentimes they're a manufacturer and they're a distributor, and they are a dropship seller, meaning that maybe 20% or 30% of their catalog they manufacture, but then the rest of their catalog, they don't want to just sell SKUs, they want to sell solutions into the market, right? And they might not manufacture the entire solution, but they want to sell an entire solution. So if I make pumps, for example, if I manufacture pumps, but I don't sell all the plumbing equipment and the valves and all those other things that go along with a pumping solution, I want to sell an entire pumping solution into the market. So I might manufacture the pumps, but then I might distribute all the other ancillary components to be able to put in a full installation and for a customer. And so I think that also DC360 data shows that by the end of 2024, which is not far away, they estimate that there'll be over 1,000 global dedicated B2B marketplaces that are active in the world. So the rise of marketplaces is absolute. It's universal. It's not just in the B2C and D2C world. It's also in the B2B world. And DC360 data also shows that it is still, and has been for the last 3 or 4 years, has been the single fastest growing B2B sales channel in the world is marketplace sales channels. So I think much like the B2C and D2C world, it's really hard to completely ignore the marketplace opportunity, not only selling on someone else's marketplaces, but if you have a website that's getting massive amounts of traffic and you're very well known as a solution provider in your industry, you don't necessarily have to carry and have in your ERP every single SKU that you sell and have to collect all the product data and manage the pricing and all that sort of stuff. By becoming a marketplace, you can have all those other vendors. You can effectively have an endless aisle where it's a very low lift for you to onboard those other products and brands into your business, because those other vendors have to load that data into your platform. And then all you've got to work out is what is the cut of the sale that you're going to get as a commission for helping to facilitate that sale. So I think there's a number of areas where B2B sellers can capitalize on marketplaces. But to your point, Alex, and to your point, Kathleen, I think you have to look at each one independently. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to sell on every marketplace I can possibly sell on. I think some present better opportunities than others, and even regionally. Like if we look at Amazon, they called out earlier this year, they specifically called out that they have massive B2B gaps, particularly in Europe. There are many categories that they cannot service today from a B2B wholesale perspective in Europe. So they're actively going out and looking for wholesale B2B sellers to populate products at scale in their marketplace in Europe, not so much in the USA. So they're willing to cut better deals to those sellers in Europe, but not in the USA. So Kathleen, to your point, I think you have to take it on a case-by-case basis and look at the commercials.
I love the point. I can't. One of you made this, but I was trying to deal with timestamps and things whilst you were talking. I can't remember who made this point, but it was a really good point, which is, it doesn't mean just because you decide to do a B2B marketplace, it doesn't mean you have to list everything. It could be, if you think about Audi, VW, all the big car brands, they're not selling their cars via B2B web marketplaces, but they are selling their post-trade, windscreen wipers, widgets, bearings, all the rest of it via that, because that's a great route to market for them. So product category segmentation could be your friend here, everybody. Right, one last slide question for you all. And any of you who are watching, if you've got questions, we've still got time for probably one more question from you guys, if you've got one to send to us. And I'm going to jump that one to one which is really, really tiny. So Jamie Huskisson, who has just been confirmed as a guest for our January Success in 2025 webinar, has asked this rather interesting question on LinkedIn when I was talking about this upcoming session, which was, this is far too big a question to ask with only 15 minutes to go, but I'd love the three of yours take on this. What does it look like when you've got B2B figured out? Right? Like in the D2C space, we probably reached a space where if you're a fashion brand and you've got it figured out, you've got this, and this sorted in your tech stack, this, and this sorted in your marketing. This is kind of there's a kind of blueprints to follow. So what does a B2B e-commerce mastery look like? And I'm leaving this super wide so you can all take it from whichever angle you fancy going at. Anyone ready, or shall I pick on one of you? Because I realise this is a massive question. Oh,
I suppose just to touch on Jason's point earlier, part of this is understanding what your B2B customers want from your website. And so when it comes, and that's true of any e-commerce site, B2B or B2C, I guess, but understanding what your B2B customers want from your website and what would actually make them use it is the actual crucial piece of what makes it a really good website. Ultimately, if we could list out all of the different features that a B2B website might have or want or possibly could be, but if that isn't what your customers actually would use, then it's pointless. You could have pack sizing, minimum order quantities, account rules and all of this other stuff on there. But if all your customers simply want to do is log in, see a price and pay by card, then that's a perfect B2B website for your customers, right? So I know this is a bit of a cop-out answer, and it isn't really a practical guide on the best looking B2B website I've ever used, but I've seen a lot of customers try to pack in so much stuff into websites that is just completely pointless because their customers don't need it. And actually the ones that keep it really simple, really focused on the stuff that their accounts actually want, are the ones that get used the most. And that's what's important at the end of it all.
I don't think that's a cop-out answer at all. As a marketer who endlessly answers questions with "it depends," because it depends. And I think that going back to the customers and actually building the functionality and the service levels that they want. Yeah. Kathleen, anything you'd add in to this?
Yeah, the whole concept of mastery in e-commerce makes me laugh a little bit, because there's always room for improvement. There's always something that can be done better. And again, keep an eye on your data, keep an eye on your analytics, be looking for those profit margin areas. Alex mentioned somebody wanting to log in and pay with a card. Well, do you have minimums or maximums of what you will accept for a credit card payment? Because you're paying fees on that. You're paying 2.5% to 4% of the cost of that. So there's a little piece of your profit going away. Are you going to allow credit cards for a $10,000 order? I would say no. I would say don't do that, especially in wholesale, because you're already selling, below your retail price. But again, wholesale is so different than retail because they order on a cadence, they order in higher volume, they are doing their own advertising for your product. They really can't be compared to direct to consumer as far as that profitability, but you do have a cost of goods, and it's really critical data wise to always be looking. So that concept of mastery, it goes across the board. Mastery in sales, mastery in accessibility, mastery in digital, mastery in your profitability and your back end, or how well you're executing, how well you're shipping, how quickly you're getting it to these people, how your accounting system is working for getting your net terms. So, I don't think there's any such thing as mastery. I think that you can always find windows and rooms and segments where you can make things better.
I love that. The different bits of mastery makes me think of that idea of, you need a level stool. And if each of those pieces of mastery are the legs on the stool, you don't want to be amazing with your site functionality, but have a sales team who don't believe in the web. Then you're not mastery in all those places. So I think that's a really good answer. Jason, your take.
Yeah, it still blows my mind when I go in and I do interviews with B2B sellers, customers on their behalf. It still blows my mind when we ask a very generic question with no nuance, like, hey, if we, your supplier that I'm interviewing you on behalf of is looking at implementing an e-commerce solution, a self-service e-commerce solution. Would that be interesting to you? Would you use it? Do you like it? With no nuance in the question, oftentimes the answer is no. Well, I like Bob. I like Jane, my sales reps. I do everything through them. Why would I need an e-commerce website? No, I don't. I wouldn't use it. But then when you dig a little bit deeper and you make, and oftentimes in B2B, they don't even use the word e-commerce. It's a whole different language set used in the B2B world versus the B2C and DTC world. We don't call it click and collect in B2B. It's called will call. We don't call it e-commerce. It's called like a trade portal or a buyer's portal or a seller's portal. It's called almost anything other than e-commerce. So when you get more nuanced in the way that you ask the question of the customer and you say, okay, that's cool. Well, even if you didn't transact and hit the buy button on this trade portal that might be set up for you, what about if you could request quotes through this portal automatically instead of having to send an email to your account manager and wait for a response and never know what the status of that quote request was? What if you could lodge your return requests electronically instead of, again, having to go through customer service maybe to deal with that? Or you could download your historic invoices, or you could, check on the inventory of a specific product, or, do some research and see what products these guys sell other than the products you already buy from them. If you could do some research online before talking to Bob or Jane to place your order, would that be interesting to you? So when you get more nuanced, or when you ask the question, you say, what do you love about doing business with the supplier today? Great. What do you hate about doing business with the supplier today? What are the pain points? Oh, you can't track your order today. You don't know when it's going to hit your warehouse. So therefore your devanning team isn't ready to receive those 3 containers that are being shipped to you. So you have no idea when it's going to arrive. And that's really painful for you to schedule when that's going to be receipted into your warehouse. And then therefore you can't tell your customers when that product's going to be available. Cool. Amazing. What if you could continue to transact the way you do, but you could log in and you could track your order all the way till it hits your warehouse, and you have an ETA for that? What if you could find out the status of your back orders and when they're likely to ship? So when you get a little bit more nuanced in the questions you ask of those customers, I tell you, if you open up an opportunity for them to tell you their pain points of dealing with you as a supplier, they'll bloody well do it. So I think you just have to create, and oftentimes they won't say those things to the supplier directly because they don't want to hurt the relationship, because maybe they've been doing business with them for 15 years and Bob or Jane is their favorite person, and they go to the ball games with them and they go to boozy lunches together and all these things. So they're hesitant to maybe be as transparent with Bob or Jane as they would with me as an outsider third party asking those nuanced questions. Because, man, I tell you, they will be transparent with me and they'll say, I hate this about doing business with these guys. If they could fix that, I would double my purchases through them in a given year. So I think ask nuanced questions, get a third party in that you're not going to get offended when somebody tells me what needs to be changed about doing business with them, and really have a heart and develop the empathy gene. I think, you have to crawl, walk, run, but ultimately mastery is predicated on the sense of empathy you have. Instead of trying to build everything for your best benefit and your efficiency and your profitability, try to have some empathy for the poor customer who's trying to do business with you. Mastery starts with empathy and ends with empathy, in my opinion.
I love your point about the nuanced questions. It's so easy to create the answers you want by asking the right questions, and it's, if you really want the answers, you have to find alternative ways of saying it, like what could we do better, what annoys you, what is, rather than just going, what do you like the most? It's all in trying to get people thinking from another angle. So team, we are nearly at the end of our session, so I would love to know, because as I think we may have said multiple times now, B2B is a complex space. It's different for everybody. So 2025, there was a year of massive opportunity for those who make the right decisions and who do all the things we've been talking about. But for those who've tuned in, who are watching us live or joining us for the replay, what's the one thing you'd like them to take away? I think we will go Alex and clockwise, if that's all right with you, Alex.
Yeah. I suppose the one thing to take away, if there's a message that has come out of this, it's know your customers. I always say this as a tip at at the end of every webinar I ever go on. Know your customers is absolutely essential. Know what they want from your B2B website and their buying experience. That's absolutely crucial. But one thing that we did talk about briefly and touched on was the data side of things. And I think this bit is the bit that's really, really coming out for a lot of our customers at the moment is those that have tracked data from the start are now in a position to make really good decisions to optimize that journey. And those that are playing catch up have kind of a skewed view on, I'm not really totally sure on, what that bit means, or, whether this part of the site is performing well, or if that kind of impacted that side. So I would say the best time to start tracking data on your website and start understanding those customer journeys is yesterday. And so start doing that now if you're not already, so that it will give you a better position to start making some decisions based off of that data when it comes to later on in 2025.
And quick follow-up, Alex. Are we literally talking about Google Analytics with a decent event set up and that kind of tracking, or something else?
Google Analytics, sales data, sales rep data, buying reports, which products are most profitable, which price points are most profitable, everything that you can get a data point on, you should be tracking.
Excellent answer. Jason, you've got about 1 to 2 minutes for your final thought.
Very quick, following on from Alex, one of the things that I see when helping a business make the business case for implementing digital channels, especially a trade portal, whatever the case may be, the ones that make the business case easiest are the ones that track their salesperson's time by activity. And what we find is that anywhere from 20 to 60% of a sales rep's time today is on pure admin functions that offer no value to them, don't put any more money in their back pocket, and don't make the customer experience better. And so when we're making that business case, it becomes very, very obvious. If we can offload 20 to 60% of a sales rep's time on admin functions to a trade portal and some level of automation, all of a sudden now we have 20 to 60% more of our sales reps' times adding value, knocking on more doors, landing and expanding with existing accounts, and treating their customers really, really well. So, but if you're not capturing that data and you're just saying, well, our customers, our sales reps, spend 40 hours a week on sales activities. But if you don't get granular with their tracking their time on what they're doing, so that you can then identify the areas of optimization and removing all of them. I don't know a salesperson alive that loves admin, but like up to half of their time, more than half of their time is spent on this crappy admin stuff that they don't want to do. So if we get sales teams on board, we get buy-in pretty quickly when we say, how about if I take away the parts of your job you hate and we automate those bits and we let you focus on the relationship building bits that you're really, really good at.
Super quick follow-up. How do you get a sales team to fill out a timesheet report?
Yeah, well, oftentimes they have to do certain things in a CRM or whatever, managing their pipeline or whatever anyway, in terms of direct selling activities that are actually growing an account or winning a new account. Usually they have to track those activities in some sort of a CRM. And so you can assume that anything that isn't tracked is probably admin.
Aha, got you. Okay, cool. So kind of an extrapolation rather than from 10:01 till...
Correct.
Got you.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Kathleen, your final thought, please.
Yeah, so expanding on Jason's point quickly, it's the same in operations. If you're running EDI and your ops person is manually processing those orders and sending them to your 3PL and then manually writing the ASN back up, that's a significant amount of time. It's about 2.5 hours for every EDI order. What are you paying that ops person? Would automation make sense? How many orders per month is that happening with? So it's the same thing on the back end ops side as Jason's talking about on the front end. As far as my final thought I want to leave people with, it's December. This is perfect timing. Make a plan. Make a plan. And don't just say in general, here's my outline. Run it across a timeline. If by the end of Q1 I have reached these targets, then these changes need to happen for Q2. And build it based across a timeline, not just in generality, and then give yourself deadlines all through that timeline. Make sure that you're hitting your inflection points, and then be willing to change the plan at the time. I always say make a plan and then make a backup plan. You've got to have risk management in place. If things aren't looking the way they're supposed to look according to your plan by Q1, figure out where and make those adjustments and put your risk management plan in place. You have a big shipment coming in and it gets seized by customs and destroyed. Now you don't have any inventory. You have to go to plan B and you have to go quickly. So you have to have already written it out. So it's critical to make a plan, put it on a timeline, and then make another plan.
Brilliant advice from all three of our panelists. Thank you so much, Alex, Jason, and Kathleen. I'm going to go and hide you guys in the green room whilst I wrap up with everybody else. Oh, she says removing her slide. So huge thanks to SparkLayer and UpPro CSV Order Upload for being our lovely sponsors for this session. Huge thanks to our experts, Alex, Jason, and Kathleen, giving you loads to think about. And then fellow Kathleen's final advice on making those plans and then speak to your customers and all those great things we've been talking about. I was about to regurgitate the entire webinar for you, which none of you need me to do right now. So good luck with your B2B in 2025. And don't forget to join us for one of our next sessions. January, we are doing e-commerce success, what's really going to move the needle in 2025 in the whole e-commerce space. And then in February, we are getting stuck into analytic strategies for sales growth. So all that good data gathering, analysis, and all the rest of it. Thank you so much for joining us for this session, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.